The Hawke statement confirming that 4 high treason dockets have been opened in response to the allegations that misleading information about South Africa's Expropriation Act was distributed in the United States. To discuss the elements of treason and whether political lobbying, even if controversial or misleading, meets the legal definition of treason, we're joined by legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala. Good afternoon, Mpumelelo. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. What a day it's been. The treason debate is gaining momentum by the hour. You've just heard their Kali Kriel, and of course necessitating a conversation on the legal elements. It's our understanding that treason is the highest crime against the state. Just take us through its legal elements.
Good evening to you, and also good evening to the viewers. Yes, indeed, it is. In fact, it's covered to 2 basic fields of law that we're in. One is the common law, in which it is then defined as consisting of 4 acts or 4 conducts in which one would engage in. It simply says, if you conduct as a particular conduct, if you have an allegiance to the country, if you're a citizen, for example, and with the intention of doing one of the following things. 1, you want to overthrow the government. 2, you are coercing government either to acts of violence or non-violence, through acts of violence or non-violence. 3, if you are violating or threatening the integrity or the independence of the security of the country. And 3, and the last one being trying to change the constitutional structure of the republic and other means, then it's going to be deemed as if you're engaging in acts of high treason. Mm-hmm. The other one, if you're trying to develop a bit, if you look into the Cyber Crimes Act, there are instances of the instigation of violence, the spreading of information through, for example, your cyber means, which is your social media, which can then be taken. The other one is through the Riotous Act. Remember, that act is still applicable. However, on that one, there's a notice that is to be issued by the Director General, who would be now then a person who would issue that particular notice to say in the government gazette, certain individual is spreading information which is false. If they continue to do so, we are going to prosecute them if they continue with the conduct that they're in. But if you look at it from a simplified version, it simply says anyone who's going to act in a manner which is unlawful with the sole intention of threatening the independence, the authority or the jurisdiction of South Africa, then it could be taken as if they're committing high treason. Mm-hmm.
Now, if we confine ourselves to the 4 elements you first spoke about on common law, does the conduct of AfriForum, because at the very least now, they have given us the leeway to also attach them to these 4 dockets, and as much as, of course, the Hawks have not indicated who they're investigating, but when listening to Kali Kriel, which I'm sure you have listened there, he has indicated that in as far as they're concerned, they're referring to them and they're confident they would win. But if we just had to look at that common law element, when we speak of treason, you've taken us through the 4 elements of overthrowing government, coercing government, violating and threatening or endangering the existence, as well as changing the constitutional structure of the republic. Does their conduct meet that criteria?
Not necessarily so. And the reason why I say that, remember that when you engage in criminal proceedings, you have to be found guilty beyond reasonable doubt, meaning there must be no other doubt that is there, other the intention that you're intending to commit high treason. In this case, let's boil it down into 2 factors that the court would look at. They would say, let's look at the conduct in AfriForum as engaged in. They've gone to a foreign country, they're engaging in those foreign countries. What's the intention of doing so? Is it one of overthrowing the republic? Well, you could argue and say, yes, if there are processes that are there, that you can go and engage in if there's certain legislation that has been in, and you go by other means through economic sabotage, which can then be taken as if you want the AGOA deal to go away, what do you mean for a number of South Africans that are there? What does it mean for a number of economic dependents that are depending on this deal of AGOA being able to go through? If you want to extend it in that extent, maybe then you can say there's a certain level of high treason that has taken place. But the most appropriate one would be if you are threatening the independence of the republic. So what you are doing is say, once the republic, which is read through its legislative means, has sat down in parliament through the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, has taken a resolution and passed a certain legislation, and you, out of your own doing, then take that particular legislation that has been passed without following internal processes that are there to make sure that you're able to challenge it, and you take it to a foreign country, and you misrepresent, or for lack of a better word, you lie about the true existence and the impact of that particular legislation. Maybe the courts could come into the conclusion of saying that there may be an act of high treason that has taken place. Mm-hmm. But the danger.
So specifically, pardon me for interjecting, just for clarity. So here, on that one, threatening the independence of the state insofar as policy formulation is concerned, could be one that they could challenge, at least the state.
It could be, but you must then weigh against that one with regards to the right of being able to express myself in the manner that I feel how. So if you look at what the South African Constitution is saying, it does not say that right of freedom of expression will only be limited to what you say to South Africans. So if you are going to engage in activities in foreign countries, one may even come in as a defense to say, I was simply expressing my opinion, I was expressing my view, not that my sole intention was to destabilize the government. And nonetheless, I do not have powers or means to do so. There's no other further action that have taken place, because another element that will come in is the element of causation. But for the utterances that I've made, what is the consequences that follow, or the series of events that followed after?
And the consequences seem to be quite significant, pardon me for interjecting there, in this respect, because you've got citizens now, there are growing calls for them to be at least held accountable, if not for treason per se. There are those in certain quarters that are saying they should be held accountable because 15,000 jobs now in the NGO space, those employees would have been paid through USAID and PEPFAR, that their jobs now are at risk. So in that respect, it seems even if one lobby group would say, our actions have been inconsequential, some would say, no, they have. 15,000 jobs could be lost. So would that even be weighed if you go to the element of economic sabotage that you spoke of?
It could be, but it's much better at court to say the actual event or bad thing has taken place. So if you are saying it's the potential, then you have a problem. Remember, it's only in civil proceedings in which you are going to say it's a balance of probabilities. Here, it must be beyond reasonable doubt, but for the action of this particular individual, this is what you have suffered. If you haven't suffered anything, that means you're going to have a problem, which is what the law enforcement agencies would need to investigate further to say, let's go down and drill to facts and drill to individuals and say, after the issuing of the statement, after the utterances of those words, these are the people that have lost their jobs. This is how it's going to impact the economy. This is how it's going to impact the health of the individuals that are there. Let's look at what did it do in terms of the independence of South Africa. Can you be able to pass a law on your own, or are you now depending on the US giving you the go-ahead in order for you to do so? If the answer to that is no, then the chances of you being able to have a successful prosecution are going to be limited. What it calls upon, though, is that now we can see that there's a deficiency, or there's a loophole in terms of legislation that needs to be tightened a bit, so that you prevent these things from happening ever again, and you prevent individuals, especially South Africans, from going out and speaking on things in which they ought to be challenged internally, and go out and speak to the international community where there are dire consequences that have followed.
So in this instance, if perhaps nothing can be done with the conduct of AfriForum in this respect, but possibly now it would allow them to address the lacuna which would allow for others to conduct themselves in this manner. But I want to take you to one last question before we close. This whole matter emanates from, among others, the signing of the Expropriation Act. And when listening to the CEO, Kali Kriel, he spoke specifically about Section 19, subsection 8. And he goes on to state that you only go to court after expropriation has taken place. And he says, with many people, it would be difficult that once you have lost your land, you find yourself litigating for a good 5 years. I mean, the resources to do that. You end up agreeing or surrendering your property, whatever would have happened. Just talk us through that. What are your views on just his interpretation of 19.8?
That interpretation ought to have been qualified a bit, though, to then say, remember that the government is not going to wake up today and say you are now taking the land that belongs to Zikalala, and it ends there. There's a communication process that takes place. You can go to court even while you haven't agreed on the price. In fact, the going to court is when we have not agreed on the price at all, which is going to be paid, which makes the expropriation of land with compensation which is non-negotiable. So the only thing that can be discussed at a later stage is how much compensation you're going to get. And if there's a dispute on that, then we go to court. So to simply present a scenario as if there is no other avenue that is available if there's a dispute that is there, there's no other reprieve in which a person or the property owner is going to have, is simply incorrect and misleading. There is that particular avenue, can be approached by anyone. In fact, in South Africa, we are lucky. We even have Legal Aid South Africa that takes on civil matters. So even if you are a property owner that does not have money, you can go to the Legal Aid South Africa. They'll be able to listen to, even if you are representing yourself. Then the presiding officer on the day would listen to you, what you have to say, look at the evidence and the facts as they are there, which brings us back to this question of saying that they have jumped the gun in terms of going to international governments to seek protection in which they do not need, when the legislation which is applicable to them is enough to protect them as it is now. All that they need to do is to follow the processes that are there and simply understand and accept that transformation is going to happen, and it has to happen come hell or high waters.
Granted, you're of the view that they've jumped the gun, but if you are or at least in agreement with those that believe that this was wrong, this is misinformation, is it illegal? Do most wrong acts then fall into that space of illegality?
It depends on the consequences that have followed with the legal framework that we have now. If the legal framework is going to have a lacuna, yes, between you and me, we can agree that it is illegal. However, when it comes to what has to be passed by the legal master, then you're going to have a problem if you take this matter to court. Even if you try it on the Rioters Act, there are various loopholes that are there. Even if you try it through common law with high treason, there are various things that have not been complied with, unless if the law enforcement agencies are going to go and investigate the matter properly and make sure that the causal link between the statements and what has been suffered can be quantified, can be articulated to certain individuals, and it's going to be easy to say, but for the conduct and the actions and the utterances that we have made AfriForum, this is what South Africa has suffered. You are threatening to overthrow the government. You are inciting violence and threatening the danger of the independence of the Republic. Hence why we are charging you with high treason.
All right, Mpumelelo, as always, thank you very much for your legal insights. That's legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikala, just giving us his view on this matter pertaining to the 4 dockets that the Hawks have confirmed have been opened, and they're now investigating high treason.